I asked my uncle to walk me down the aisle instead of my stepdad, and my mom threatened to skip the wedding. Here's what happened on the big day. So, I'm a 26-year-old woman, and I'm getting married to my boyfriend, who's 28, in just a couple of weeks. We've been together for 3 years and engaged for the last 7 months. Last week I asked my uncle, who's 55, to walk me down the aisle. My uncle is my dad's older brother, and he's pretty much been the only father figure in my life since my dad passed away when I was just 4. Honestly, I barely have any memories of my dad. My mom, who's 48, had to work long hours as a real estate agent, so I ended up spending tons of time with my uncle and his family. They're basically like my second family. Don't get me wrong, I love my mom a lot and totally appreciate everything she did for me, especially since raising me alone couldn't have been easy. But my uncle and his family mean the world to me, and I thought it was only right for him to walk me down the aisle. When I asked him, he agreed in a heartbeat, and we were both super happy about it. However, when I told my mom about this, she didn't take it well at all. She felt I should have consulted her first because she had hinted to my stepdad that I'd ask him, and now he might feel hurt. For context, my stepdad has only been in my life for the past few years. While we get along just fine, we're not particularly close. I mean, he's my mom's husband, but I don't really see him as a father figure. If he had tried to be more involved in my life, maybe I would have considered it, but that never happened. My mom started dating him 8 years ago, and they've been married for 5, so I wasn't a kid when I met him, and he's never played a big role as a parent. I explained all of this to my mom, but she still wasn't happy. She insisted I should ask my stepdad instead because she thought my uncle would understand and my stepdad might feel left out. I felt like it wasn't my responsibility to include him, so I stood my ground and told her that wasn't happening. I believe my uncle deserves this, and it's my wedding, so it's my decision. A few days ago, during a phone call, she hung up on me when I said that she couldn't change my mind. I thought that was the end of it. But later that day, she came over and started the same argument again. She wanted me to replace my uncle with my stepdad for the walk down the aisle, saying it would help us build a better relationship. It was exhausting because I'm already swamped with work and wedding preparations, and this was just too much. Our argument got heated, and she eventually threatened not to attend my wedding if I didn't agree. This really pissed me off because it felt like she cared more about my stepdad's feelings than mine on one of the most important days of my life. In the heat of the moment, I told her she was free not to come, and mentioned that she'd miss a very special guest I had planned to introduce her to. I had been planning a surprise for her on the wedding day with this amazing guest, a real estate legend who runs one of the biggest firms in the city. My mom has looked up to her for years and always wanted to work with her, especially since she's thinking of starting her own business. This woman happens to be a close friend of my mother-in-law from college. When I found out about the connection, I asked my mother-in-law to invite her because I knew it would make my mom super happy. After I told my mom about the guest, she did a complete 180 and accused me of being unfair. She said she only threatened to skip the wedding to make me ask my stepdad and didn't know about the special guest. But by then, I was too upset and told her that now I knew her true feelings, that my stepdad's feelings were more important to her than my own wishes for my wedding. And that's where we are now. I'm really torn because I wanted my mom to be happy, but I also believe my uncle deserves this moment with me. It's a mess, and it's stressing me out even more than the actual wedding planning. I was already super busy with work and wedding prep, so I just couldn't bring myself to care about how she was feeling about all this. I asked her to leave because I was overwhelmed and didn't have the bandwidth to deal with her too. I told her she had really pissed me off and that at that moment I had no intention of listening to her. My blood was boiling because of her behavior, and I just needed her to go so I could think about what to do next. When I stood up and she did too, she started trying to bargain with me, saying she took back everything she said and just wanted to be at the wedding. But I was in such a bad mood from our fight that I just kept pushing for her to leave. When she tried to stand her ground and argue, I started yelling and said I needed her to go because I was stressed out and couldn't handle this right now. I told her I didn't care if she wanted to come to the wedding or not, because she had put me in a tough spot and had been selfish. She had no right to make any demands. I told her I'd think about it and talk to her later, but at that moment I had nothing more to say, and that arguing further would just make things worse for her. She eventually left, looking really unhappy that I had forced her out without committing to letting her attend the wedding. After she left, I managed to calm down and talk to my fiancé on the phone since he was away for a week on a business trip. I decided I would think about whether to let her come to the wedding later, but at that time, I was still really annoyed with her. The next day, I was getting ready to head out to work and thought I'd contact my mom in a few days to sort things out, but she couldn't give me space. He to cool down and showed up at my place right as I was about to leave for work, even though she knew my schedule. Instead of apologizing, she started justifying herself, saying my stepdad felt left out during the wedding prep. To cheer him up, she told him I might ask him to walk me down the aisle so he wouldn't feel worried, and to make him feel like part of the family. She said he had always been insecure about his place in my life and felt threatened by my uncle, who seemed to be the man of the family. So she just told him what she did to make him feel better. Honestly, I get why she wanted to make her husband feel good with some white lies, but why did it have to be at my expense? She knew I had no intention of doing what she suggested and that my stepdad and I were never close. She was setting him up for disappointment. Instead of just apologizing, she kept explaining that she didn't want her husband to feel bad and said I would understand after I got married. She insisted this wasn't a reason to cut her out of the wedding, because she was still my mom and deserved to be there. I tried to tell her we'd talk about it after work, but she insisted I commit then and there to including her in the wedding. I just wanted to get to work on time, so I tried to shake her off by saying yes, but then she insisted I talk to my stepdad and explain why I chose my uncle, not wanting to be the bad guy. At that point, I lost it. Not only was she making me late, but she was also wasting my time with these demands. I had already told her she could come to the wedding just to get her off my back, but now she was asking too much. I told her right there in the doorway that I had enough. She was wasting my time, and while I understood she wanted my stepdad to feel validated, it wasn't my responsibility. It was hers. She started talking about how she had raised me alone and that this was the least I could do for her. I snapped back, reminding her she didn't do it all on her own. She got a lot of help from my grandparents and my uncle. All right, let me expand and rewrite that for you in a more casual tone. So here's what went down. My mom was spinning this story about how she raised me all on her own, which was total BS, because my dad and his family were always there. I wasn't having any of it, and eventually, I told her straight up that she wasn't welcome at my wedding. That, of course, made her flip out and call me ungrateful. I walked off to my car, drove away as fast as I could, but I was still fuming for a long time. Even then, she kept blowing up my phone while I was driving to work. Fed up, I blocked her as soon as I got to the office, hoping to get my head together for the day. But nope, when I got back home, there she was waiting right on my doorstep. She rushed up to me, insisting I couldn't be serious about banning her from my wedding. By then, I was done. I told her I absolutely meant it and that she was acting crazy. I wasn't likely to change my mind. Unluckily, my fiancé was out of town, so I had to deal with her solo. She kept trying to argue with me while I insisted she leave. Finally, I snapped and threatened to call the cops, even showing her my phone to prove I was serious. She started crying, calling me heartless and all that, saying she couldn't believe how I was treating her after everything she did for me. I felt bad, but told her she had pushed me to this point, and I had no other choice. After more tears, she finally left. A few days later, I still felt bad about the whole mess. My fiancé and I talked it over, and he thought I did what was necessary, but the guilt was eating at me. With all the wedding stress and my overloaded work schedule, I didn't know if I overreacted or if my mom's behavior really justified my reaction. We were both clueless about what to do next, so here I am, looking for advice. Update time. First off, Big thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. Your insights were super helpful. My fiancé and I have been reflecting a lot over the past week and a half and decided we need to dial back our wedding plans. We're not changing anything we've already paid for, but we're trimming the guest list. We had almost 200 people on it, folks we hadn't spoken to in years, more stress and expense than we could handle. So, we've cut it down to just the folks we really want there, which is way more reasonable and makes me feel way better. On the work front, I realized I'd bitten off more than I could chew. I talked to my bosses, and they were cool with me offloading some of my work. They actually thought it was a good move since I was juggling too much. Now, I'm aiming for a stress-free wedding and feeling a lot better overall. Finally, regarding the guest list, my mom and stepdad are definitely not making the cut. You've read the original post, so you know why. Cutting them out was a big part of our decision to rethink our guest list and wedding planning strategy. So, here's the deal. My mom has been piling on these crazy expectations about my wedding, and not just on me, but on my stepdad, too. Honestly, I don't even want him at the wedding, and without my mom there, I don't see why he should be either. Things got messy when I made my mom cry the other day, and we haven't talked since. Weirdly enough, it's been kind of nice, because I was really getting tired of her nonsense. I had a chat with my uncle about how my mom's been acting. He said he wouldn't have minded if I replaced him with my stepdad for the wedding if my mom insisted on it. Sure, he'd have felt bad, but he wouldn't have kicked up a fuss. But that wasn't the point. It's my wedding, and I want my uncle to walk me down the aisle. My mom should have respected that instead of blowing things way out of proportion. Now, we're not even on speaking terms with just 8 weeks to go before. The big day. It's a bummer that things have turned out this way, but I'm trying to make peace with it. For the record, I haven't blocked my mom anywhere. I mean, I did for a hot second, but then I unblocked her that same night. She could have reached out to apologize, but she hasn't. My anger's simmered down a lot, and she's had plenty of time to rethink things. But since nothing's changed, I'm starting to think we won't patch things up before the wedding. It sucks because I really did want her to be there. We've always had a good relationship up until now, so I don't get why she's messing it up. I'm disappointed, but I'm still hopeful we can sort things out before the wedding. Oh, and about the invitations, I sent them out a few days ago, and, as expected, my mom and stepdad didn't get one. They were pissed. Apparently, they had been asking around, and when they found out most of the family got their invites, they lost it. My stepdad was genuinely surprised, which I kind of get because we're not super close, but he's still family. Plus, he didn't really know what my mom had been up to. But my mom, that's a different story. I told her ages ago she wouldn't be invited because of her behavior. We hadn't spoken in weeks, and our last conversation was pretty rough. So I don't understand why she showed up at my house with my stepdad demanding answers. They came right when I was about to leave for work, probably on purpose to annoy me. Lucky for me, I had the day off, so I had time to deal with their drama. My fiancé was there this time too, which helped. We invited them in, even though they were already yelling. We kept things calm and dealt with it in a civil way. No screaming matches that wouldn't solve anything. Once they finished venting, I explained to my stepdad why they weren't invited. My mom hadn't told him the full story. So I laid it out, how she kept insisting I replace my uncle with him to walk me down the aisle. I told him my uncle has always been there for me, unlike him, and why this was important to me. He went quiet after. That because he hadn't heard my side before. Then, I turned to my mom and reminded her she knew about my decision. There was no need for her to make such a big fuss now. She hadn't tried to fix things or apologize, even though I left the door open for her by not blocking her. She never reached out, so now she's not coming to my wedding. I thought I was being fair, but here we are. So she just kept yelling at me, calling me an ungrateful child, and going on about how she deserved better. I think she was trying to make me feel guilty, but honestly, I just got more and more irritated after a while. It must have been pretty clear to everyone that my fiancé and I weren't interested in keeping the conversation going because my stepdad eventually grabbed my mom by the arm and said we weren't even worth their time. Then they stormed out, which was a relief, really. After they left, I went ahead and blocked both of them. To be honest, I'm just so relieved that it's finally over. I really hope they leave me alone now. So, update 3. I got married 2 days ago, and it was exactly how I imagined it would be. All those months of planning really paid off. We decided to cut down the guest list, and it turned out to be a great idea. With fewer people, we were able to chat with everyone who came and give them our time. It wasn't too crowded, which made everything feel super pleasant and dreamy. Surprisingly, I did find myself missing my mom a bit, but my uncle and my fiancé were right there, cheering me up and promising they'd always be there for me. That made me feel loads better, and I pretty much forgot all about it once I hit the dance floor. In short, we had an amazing time, and I don't regret anything about how it all went down. Now, my husband and I are getting ready to leave for our honeymoon in a few days, and I just know it's going to be absolutely perfect.